So I'm super excited to have you all here on campus and so many of you as well online. So welcome to this event. My name is Marie-Laure Kai. I'm an adjunct professor at ESSEC Asia Pacific. And I've been teaching here for about 15, so almost since the very beginning of the opening of ESSEC in Singapore. In addition to teaching at ESSEC, I am also the founder and director of a company called The Human Factor, and I am also a French trade advisor. So today we're going to hear stories from our panelists, from French trade advisors. So why did we invite them to share their stories with you? So I've talked to many of you here in the audience, maybe online, I'm not sure. And I've also discussed with my colleagues here in the Asia Pacific campus. And I've talked to prospective students, and I realized that many of you had the same questions on how to start and build a career in Asia Pacific. So with my colleagues from ESSEC, we decided to invite senior business leaders from the French community to answer those questions and share their stories. So today, we hope that you will leave this session with a few key takeaways. First, we'd like you to understand what motivated them to start a career here and thrive as well. Number two, how did they navigate the challenges and how did they take advantage of the opportunities that they face throughout their time in the region? Number three, we'd like to hear their perspective on leadership. And then I hope you will also get some advice for yourself when you join, that will help you when you join the workforce. And personally, I hope that you will be inspired, at least to explore opportunities and to start working in the region. I see some familiar faces, so that's good. I've been mentioning a few times the French trade advisors, and you might, who are they and what do they do? So to answer these questions, I will invite Joris Bernard, who is a French trade advisor and who is an and who is the Southern Asia at Salasia. Joris.
Hello, Marie-Laure. So good evening, everybody. So just a few words about this French trade advisor. You can become one of us after some years in international experience. Usually we say within at least 10 years in international posting to be able to be eligible to become a French advisor. So we are 4,500. So we are few of them. So it's a businesswoman and a businessman. We are in about 150 countries. This CCE has been existing for more than 120 years. And it's a voluntary position, so we don't get for our mission. And we have 4 missions mainly. So the first one is to advise the public authority. So for example, we have a monthly meeting with the ambassador and with trade advisor sitting in the embassy to share experience and to share challenge that we see watch the trend in the business and sometimes also the issue we have in some countries to identify some barriers for us to develop. The second mission is also to support French companies internationally. So meaning that you have some small and medium enterprise, for example, in France, who want to start their implementation in a new country. So they can reach us and we can advise them or to provide some information about the country. So Marie-Laure has been here for 15 years in Singapore. You will see later on some people also have been here for many years. So we are supposed to know very well the country where we are and we can advise some small companies to help them, to give them some guidance to settle in a new country. We also help sometimes to prepare some trade agreement with some countries and to share information to the authorities. We also help some local company in the country with mentoring. Sometimes we have some young entrepreneur who start a business. They are alone, they don't have many supports, they may support from the head office. So we are also here to navigate in their new country. Some mission is about supporting young talent and especially the VIE. So for those who speak French, les VIE. Usually we help some company and we can do some send VIE in a country where they don't have existing office, for example. So this are hosted by the French Chamber of Commerce, but we can help them also in the country. And as member as a CCE, we are also encouraged to open some new job of VIE in and to develop. It's an important vehicle for French authorities also. And finally, our last mission is to be a kind of role of ambassador in our to encourage local company to invest in France. So we are here to push attractiveness for example, Singaporean company to invest in France, start some business. So that's it, 4 main missions on a voluntary basis.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Thank you. We can clap. Okay. Before we invite Sid, I'd love to hear from you and who you are. So in the audience first, who is a student, a current student? Mostly student. Okay, good. Who is an alumni? Yes, I remember you were a couple of years back. Fantastic. And I think we've covered pretty much the whole ground. And we have some ESSEC colleagues in the background. Thank you. Fantastic. Online, I know we have a very large audience online, a few hundred people. Could you maybe type where you are based? I know we have some people from France, China, India. And if you could type where you are so that we know who is here. So if you could type your location, and Avantika, our online moderator, will share your answers with us. Avantika?
Hello. We have 2 responses right now. It's just India and France at the moment.
India and France. And we have some participants as well from China. Good. If you're not located in those 3 countries, please type and Avantika will share it with all of us later on. Good. So I would like to invite our panelists to come seats. And then we will start. I will introduce all of them to you. Good. Fantastic. So you may sit down. Go ahead. So we have the pleasure to welcome Romaric Ernst from Schneider Electric, who is the Vice President for Power Product for East Asia. Then we have Olivier Gergelet, who is Senior Partner at Ernst & Young, and he specializes in consumer products and retail, the retail sector. Good. Then we have Mimi Giraud, who built a career in the tech sector in Asia Pacific, and she's also an entrepreneur, having founded a company called A Wine Adventure. And she is an ESSEC alumna. And we have Nicolas Lebas, who is the Senior Managing Director at Tiroga, a company you founded about 7 years ago. And Nicolas teaches at ESSEC as well. He teaches finance. Do you see any of your students here?
Yes.
Good. Great. So I'm going to proceed as follows. I'm going to ask a few questions for about 40-45 minutes. And then after that, I will leave the floor open to you and you will be able to ask questions. So we'll start with the beginning. And we'll start with personal stories. And I'd love to hear what motivated all of you to start your career or to maybe not start, but actually to come to Asia Pacific and to stay in Asia Pacific, to build here. Mimi.
Ladies first, as usual.
Yeah.
All right, so I've been in APAC for the past 14 years. So I initially moved to Australia. And why did I move to Australia, to Melbourne? It was because it was the new El Dorado. I actually didn't have a job when I looked to move there. I was within the telco, I was within Verizon, and I wanted to get transferred. Didn't work, so I said, I'm gonna make it to Australia with or without you. So I took my little backpack and I went there on a holiday for 3 weeks to look for a job. I finally got an opportunity with Orange Business Services, so still in the telco. And I moved to Australia a few months later after wrapping up our little anecdote. When I landed, I had ended up into Melbourne. I had been looking for a job in Sydney, Hobart, in Tasmania, in Brisbane, but I'd never been to Melbourne. And I literally landed the day before my birthday with no one to pick me up at the airport. I didn't know anyone, zero. And the lady, the sister of the supposed to pick me up, she was 18, she totally forgot about it. So I took a picture of myself in terms of national arrival, saying, I will tell that story to my grandkids. For that, I'm telling it to you. But it was scary. I literally moved down to some places, right? So a big leap of faith, but it was like people have moved to the US before. For me, that was my far west. I stayed there for 3 years and I happened to meet a French gentleman in Singapore. Why make it simple when you can make it complicated? So we flew back and forth for 2 years and I finally moved to Singapore for love. This time I knew someone, but I didn't have a job. So I quit my job at Orange. I came to look for a job for 3 weeks again and got an opportunity with Schneider Electric.
Good choice.
And the rest is history. I've been here for 11 years.
Thank you. Good. Talking about Schneider Electric, Omar, can you share what motivated you to?
Yeah, first very opportunistic. I was a student in France in a business school, and I had to choose a place to do my exchange program. So eventually I look at all the possible destination, and the one that sounded the most exotic was Thailand. And I thought anyway, well, it's likely to be this region that could potentially be an engine for growth for the world economy. So I said, okay, let's give it a try. To really validate this experience, I did my internship, the end of my MBA internship with Schneider Electric. So that was my first experience in Thailand for Schneider. And I'm still here. So eventually I decided to stay because this somebody offered me the chance to develop my career. Finding a good balance between keep developing, learning, being exposed to new things, but also leveraging on your achievement and experience to do new things, to be promoted, to have impact. So I've done multiple jobs in this 17 years in project management, in business development, in sales, in strategy, and now leading for what we call East Asia, which is Southeast Asia, Taiwan, Japan.
Fantastic. So you already feel like there is a theme here, like adventure. We talked about El Dorado. Nicolas, what's yours?
Well, I'm going to definitely agree on all what you said, especially. But on my side, it was not a voluntary decision to start with. It was totally opportunistic. I was in front. I had already had a interesting career in finance, working for big blue chip firms. I created my company in Paris. I sold after a few years. in France. Next. And I was proposed basically to go to Asia by a family shareholder of a company, basically to take over the company we had there, to turn it around. It's not doing very well. And I kind of, the decision was I was married time to other ones who were born in Asia. And with my wife was challenging to go to Asia. For me, it took like, one afternoon to decide yes. Why? Typically because for the challenge of turning around. But also definitely the adventure, the culture, the Asian culture, which is for European very exotic in itself, much more than and also the opportunity. Time, establishing myself, was a sure way to not only sure, but also definitely grasp the opportunity of growth that you can find in Asia, in a region which is sophisticated enough also, to build things in the profession. It's two dimensions, the cultural adventure, but also economic opportunity, really seduced me. My wife said, okay, but then only for hers. I was like, and I'm still with my wife. But she's happy too.
That often happens, right? People say, "Oh, I'm here just for 2
Yeah,
days."
exactly, very often.
20 years.
They are still there.
Yes. How about you?
So I think I'm going to be pretty consistent with everything I said. So apologies. I think now in my case, I've always been fascinated by other cultures, other people having different habits, practices, and actually on the personal side, since quite young, each time I had the opportunity to go abroad, I would just take a bike and travel. Right? That's some people do other things, right? I would just go and travel. More or less far away, depending on the means that you have at the time. But I think that's really something that has always been a passion of myself and luckily of my wife after my kids, which has been, we really love to travel to kind of meet. In terms of then, once you like that personally, then say why not professionally, obviously. Now, professionally, it's not that you decide to go to a specific country. For me, it was just embracing opportunities. I was in the engineering school in France. I got across presentation from Procter & Gamble at the time. And I happened to study in one of the target universities. So, they would just come and present the company. I had no clue who was P&G at the time. I just knew some of the products. And, they were proposing great internship in Brussels. Yeah, Brussels, European capital, and lots of,
It's very
opportunity.
It's not
There's nothing about exotic, but what is the European program? Yeah, basically internship program with 30 nationalities. So I think that was really kind of, and started with that. Therefore, joined P&G in Brussels. After a few years, 3 years, I think my boss came one day out of Newcastle upon Tyne, which is in the northeast of England, which is even less exotic. But guess what? Loved it.
Okay.
Then came back to Brussels, and another day, another boss came to me and say, "What about going to Latin America?" Yeah, when do you need to know? Well, if you can sing it over the weekend, and then you come back to me after. And then I ended up spending 5 years in Caracas, which was probably on the other side of the spectrum of Singapore in terms of safety, security, but just love the experience. And then at some point, we had made we traveled a lot, Latin America, Europe. What was missing was Asia. And again, opportunity came to kind of a job in Singapore, very, very naturally. And then I just decided to move without necessarily having the vision to stay 11 years. But, I've done 11 years and I'm planning to stay for another many years. So I think that's all about a mix probably of embracing opportunities, being adventurous, but also liking to interact with people that are a bit different.
Summarize it. Thank you.
Okay.
I was about to do it, but you did it brilliantly. Good. Romani,
Yes.
you shared with us that you basically have built your career at Schneider Electric. Can you share maybe some anecdotes of how you managed your career?
Probably very early in my career, I've been lucky to have a great boss who tell me, yeah, you are from business school in a very traditional engineering company. You will struggle to get legitimacy and credibility if you take a job early on that is very hands-on. Maybe not very flashy. I want to do marketing, strategy. You go to projects, really understand the core of our business. And it's probably one of the best advice I got from any boss. Even probably once a week, I can reflect on this experience when I see customer, when I talk to my teams, and use that knowledge, that the roots of how a company works to try to bring value and contribute. So starting in a very simple, operational, hands-on job really helped me many years later to progress, to understand.
And I think that's a great advice for a lot of you to see, okay, maybe you will not start with the flashy job titles, but we consolidate, or we build a knowledge that will be helpful afterwards. Okay.
And a few years later, 10 years later, at that time, I had the flashy job as a BT. And very ambitious. Okay, I want to be business leader, manage my P&L, manage my team. Another great boss, very straightforward. It will have a sales experience. Actually, it can happen if you don't, but in my case, you cannot. Sales job. So he gave me a job of sales manager, which on the paper is look like a demotion. You go from director to manager. But that was certainly the fastest career acceleration I ever took. 2 years later, I was director. 4 years later. So it somehow gave me, again, it's tick a box, but it's also give me the exposure to learn something I did not have, but also show the rest of the organization I was willing to take the necessary step to develop, to learn, and eventually to evolve.
And I assume it helps you now as you manage it.
Yeah, of course. Then you face customer, yeah, for sure. But again, is about how you build your credibility, but also with customers.
Of course. Thank you so much. Mimi, you had also a long career. Can you share one of your success stories of memorable experience and what you learned?
So after Schneider Electric, I stayed for 8 years, but I made a move. I wanted to go into general management, and I got the opportunity to lead a small consulting firm called Source Group. That was 35 people when I joined it. I was responsible for ASEAN, but it was mainly Singapore. And I joined them during COVID, right? Middle of COVID, 2021. So you can imagine the challenge that it was taking such a role. And it was a cloud consulting firm. We're helping highly regulated industries such as banks, insurance, and telcos move. Yeah, very high hands-on keyboard consultant. It was quite difficult. Interestingly, we had a very strong culture, and I had to build on top of it as well. I think that for me, the fantastic success was to having that job already, and that was my first general management role, was to be able to integrate the culture and develop it. In the span of a year and a half, we grew the region 45% year on year, which means we doubled the revenue, we doubled the number of people, And actually, at that time, the problem was that we couldn't get anybody to come in, right? The frontier were closed. So finding the right people was very succeeded. We also opened new countries, moving Malaysia, Philippines, and Japan. So for me, that was being completely in control of the P&L, of the hiring, and there was no hiring at the time. But to be able to develop the strategy and implement it and have all the levers was incredibly empowering.
What helped you to do that?
So the understanding of, so I have been working not just in Asia, I've been working in the US before moving to APAC 14 years ago. And that ability to work with different culture, not just the Asian culture, but then the ability to, because through Schneider, through Orange, I had been exposed to the whole region, 16 countries in the region. When we opened the new countries, when we discussed with the client, I knew how I could work differently with Japanese, Malay, Filipinos, and of course Singaporeans, all the local culture. And that is something that is really key in terms of success. Understand, especially when you don't live here, when you come from somewhere else, that Asia is extremely different, and each country has a very particular culture. And that's something that people don't know when they have not lived. And it's also something that you need to know by going to each of these countries, by eating and how people work together, how they give feedback, how they receive feedback, how they will also tell you yes or no.
We'll go back to the cultural nuances, but that's a very good point. Building a career, of course, it's not just successes and nice stories, it's also challenges and difficult moments. Nicolas, can you share with us one of them and how you overcome this?
So I would say it was at the start of my experience here in Asia. The start was not easy and difficult. So I decided in Malaysia first. After start a successful career in France and in Europe, in London, some mindset that was very education and my culture. French are said to be possibly from time to time, a bit arrogant. Not sure whether you would agree.
Who's French here?
I would not agree, but I've heard that.
No.
And although before establishing myself in Malaysia, I relatively good schools, it was all about turning around this company in a sector which I did not know much, which was basically trading, something I didn't know anything about. It's typically French to send someone who doesn't know anything. Take responsibility. And I knew I didn't know much to take the advice or the experience of staff, especially in terms of trading. And so, but I did it the French way. Every morning we had a meeting, market session. I started to give mine. And then I asked people to give theirs. And systematically for 6 months, their opinions were very it's confirming that I was superior. But the result of the company because of my opinion and my decisions were confirmed by the staff, were not that beneficial. Instead of turning around the company, it started to plunge even more. So, up to the time where I realized, because of someone in the staff coming here in Asia, so it's true there are different cultures, but constant also. In Asia, the boss is the boss. It's extremely difficult for people to publicly go against the advice, the opinion. So that may be part of it. I think very so first let them speak and then give my opinion. 20 years, the results came very fast after. So it gave me some good lessons about, in effect, changing the way you behave and learning to listen to others. Not sure my kids will agree that I still listen. At least at work, I hope.
Fantastic. And that's a nice transition to our next, which is leadership in the region and leading a team in Asia Pacific. And so to be successful as a leader in the region, you need specific skills, specific qualities as well. So Olivier, what do you think are some of those skills and qualities? Talked about maybe a cultural agility, cultural knowledge, and all of you are nodding, I can see that. Can you see other ones or share other ones about it?
Sure. So let me start maybe with one thing that we always see in consulting, but I think it's even more true in the industry, is that you typically get hired with your IQ because of your IQ, and you are growing because of your IQ. And I think this is probably true everywhere, but especially as a foreigner that wants to succeed in APAC, I think EQ is even more important. It's all about, and I think to Nicolas' point, right? It's all about how you are really trying to understand the other people that either managing or that you're working with, and trying to understand what are the implications, or what is the impact that your words of your body language have on people, and being basically aware of what are the other people thinking, what are the other people's beliefs, what are the other people, I love Nicolas' example, because that really shows that if you're not aware that those guys are going to follow whatever you say, even if you tell them to go dig a hole and get into it, then that becomes a big issue, right? So I think there's many qualities on leadership, and you can read all that. I think the key one for me is really how you make sure that you grow your EQ. And the good news is that EQ is not something that is necessarily natural. People can be more natural in terms of EQ skills. But I was blessed very early on in my career to be exposed to that EQ concept, which I had no clue, frankly, when I was a student. And probably one of the best advice I got, one of my boss at the time gave me a couple of books on EQ that I read, and that was really insightful. And I think if you really continue to read, continue to observe people that are, because best way is to observe people that are bad EQs and people that are good EQs, and it's not difficult to discriminate. And I think learning from the what to do and not to do, I think is really something you're learning from your environment. And by the way, it's not about learning from your boss or your peers or your subordinates. I think you can learn from anybody. EQ doesn't belong to a class or a type of people. Also, I think that most of the leaders that are successful will typically that's what makes the difference. Right? And some people never understood, by the way, why they have the best performance, right? They are the most technically savvy, and they don't get promoted. They don't understand that proven probably a good reason why they are there.
Thank you so much. Romero, I see you were nodding. What's your perspective?
No, fully agree. Definitely learning to build rapport help along the way to having a strong EQ, to develop your network and to keep a growth mindset. How we make sure we don't become either cynical or know-it-all, but challenge ourselves to keep learning from our bosses, but also from our peers, from our team. That's definitely important. But to me, when you develop, interesting to keep in mind the different way to develop, and definitely there is the exposure part of it, there is the experience part of it. Education still matter. I was very fortunate to grow my career in Schneider Electric, who has a very structured and intentional people development framework. It's not enough by itself. You definitely need to develop everything we have discussed so far, but it helps. And basically, along the way, there is a program to help young professionals, middle manager, leaders to be exposed to those concepts on both the hard skill, like finance for non-finance skill, but also the soft skill, how to manage, how to stay agile, how to manage uncertainty. Those type of things you probably learn in business school, but when you grow your career and you a life example, that's a very powerful reminder. So great program from different schools that really helped me along the way.
And what you say, just to follow up, I think it's a great advice as well for when you're considering, for example, working for a large group, to take into your approach and research, what are the companies that offer action and electric, those programs that are very well thought through and very structured, and you said intentional, right? To offer the right resources, right support at different stages of your career. So to take this into account as well in your research and choices, I think is quite important. So we'll continue on the cultural nuances and the cultural agility, and I'd love to hear Mimi's perspective as a woman in tech in Asia Pacific. How was that?
All right, so when I moved to Australia, I had been working 15 years into in telco. So male-dominated environment, that's for sure, especially in time. France, the UK, many places. And to be honest, when I moved to Australia, I thought I would, do well because I'd worked and lived in the US, in the UK. I thought I would know both of it. It was different. I still had to learn to navigate. See, I went 15 years back. However, when I moved to Singapore, I was extremely, not surprised, but happy because I saw a big change. And I saw a land of, so really as a woman in tech, I felt that the opportunities in Singapore were much larger. Maybe because I was a fish out of water in Australia and I was not born, I said I didn't know all the codes. But I thought it was easier here, much easier. And maybe also I had a different status, I got married, maybe that changed things as well. But I felt it was easier to, and that there were more opportunities to grow and to get into the chance here.
Nicola, in the finance sector and as an entrepreneur, anything?
Yeah, I would say what is really important to me is one, to recognize the difference in culture, behavior, but able to identify them, both on your side and on the side, from country and people. So know yourself, your culture, where you come from, its assets and its liabilities, to speak like a finance language. And from there, very often, what people tend to do is to see that as antagonistic. It's the example, Asia, versus Europe. European culture is much more individualistic. Asian culture is much more on the group. And you need so, of course, to recognize that in a precise way, depending on where. But thereafter, it's seen as antagonistic. When you say, well, it's nice for these people, but basically they can lack creativity because they don't succeed in expressing themselves. And the say, European, of course, discipline, they can be creative, but thereafter, in terms of execution and making things up so individualistic that you know. So how to navigate that is really to understand it's complementary. Be humble enough to recognize the value that your side. So sure enough yourself, know when basically to impose your times when it's important to do. It's really seeing things complementary like this that can make it happen and navigate within different cultures.
Fantastic. So before I take questions from you, I will end my questions with a round of quick questions. I would like you to give short answers. So the first question, Mimi, if you could be a student again, what is the one course that you would take?
So I was at ESSEC over 30 years ago, so you can imagine. I remember a class I took at the time I was given was about culture, and it was, for instance, I learned that in Asia you have to present the card with two hands. That in some country you have to be the last to talk, and these knowledge, this learning, have helped me, had stuck around and have helped me until now. So, but you can still learn, can keep still learning. So if I were going back to school today, I think I would take a class about culture. Talk about it, you keep learning about other culture, but you also keep learning about it. So I think that all of us, we're telling you about our stories, about our experience, and it seems pretty obvious now, but you will be faced in your career with situation every day where you need to navigate, and you'll be thinking that you understood up front, and then you realize that you missed a lot of things. And going back regularly to the drawing board, going back to questioning your own culture, understanding how this has happened, why this has happened, the passive aggressive, the things that were lost in translation is really something that we never stop learning about.
So thank you, Mimi, for your answer. What would be your choice of class, of course?
I sound very clear. It would be coding.
Okay.
And the only reason I think is if you look at where the world goes, Gen AI is going to be over us. Right? And what's behind Gen AI is nothing else than algorithms coding at its best. And people will tell you, yeah, but we don't need code. You don't need to understand coding because ChatGPT can do it for you. But if you really want to leverage all those new technologies, I think coding is like the English of 50 years ago. Right? If you wanted to live, to work in business, right, in a relatively international context, you have to speak English, even if it's with a French accent. That's okay. I think the future is English would be given, and maybe you don't need to speak. You can speak English for you. But I think coding is really something that people that have a good understanding and in-depth understanding of coding would have a good chance to succeed. And I would study.
Second question. Is there one book that you would like to recommend to business school students to prepare them for their future?
A book I wrote quite late in my career, a lot of mistakes before. It's a very interesting book many of us referred to, I think, in this conversation. It's called The Culture Map
Yeah.
by Erin Meyer.
Yeah.
It's a fabulous book, not only to give us some insight on other culture, but more importantly, on how our own culture is compared versus a specific culture, whether American, it's Korean, and so on. I think it's very interesting because I don't think the goal is to adjust the way you behave to a specific culture, but to find the right balance, the right understanding, being curious, being empathetic, to make the most of your own culture in a certain system. And this is where diversity really brings value. Where, yes, you understand, you make the most of the culture you live in, but you also bring your own, bring differentiation, bring value. But it's need, again, to be done with a purpose, intentionally.
And what you're saying as well, to continue is to develop better self-awareness of your own preferences. And being a leader is being self-aware as well, how you behave, how you impact others, how others impact you. So that's part of the journey as a leader. And it can, you can approach it from the angle of culture. Good. Nicolas, what would be the book you would recommend?
First, I will come back to the first question, saying I'm very disappointed that my two friends here have not mentioned the firm valuation course. Which is at the top of the education. No, more seriously, I would say the memoir of Lee Kuan Yew.
Okay.
Are really very interesting. Because it's an extraordinary example of strong leadership, extremely strong leadership, taking the best practice of any world, which is basically looking for truth with common sense and working with the group and for the encourage you to read this. Very fascinating.
All right, third question. Olivier, what is one piece of advice, we'll end with the advice, that you wish you'd been given when you started your career?
It's very simple. Follow your passion. Follow what you want, what you like. I think if you just follow this, succeed. The worst thing that you can happen to you is do things because you think it's fancy, do things because it's trendy. You just don't like.
And what
the reality of career is now for you is going to be probably 40 years, right? So
at least
45, I don't know.
50.
And or 50, maybe 60, and then let's keep going. And already like what you do. Right.
But what happens if you don't know what your passion is? Which is often the case at the beginning of the career.
It's a good question.
That's a good answer.
No, I think what's very important then is get to know the world, right? So talk to as many people as you can. Talk to senior people, young people, successful people, people that have not been very successful according to them, and just to try to understand. Because I tell you, when I moved to consulting, I probably have talked to at least 50 or 60 consultants before joining the consulting world.
50?
Or 50 or 60, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, you have to, because, at least for me, I had to, because it was, an important, don't know what it looks like until you really talk. And trust me, I didn't know what consulting was, even after talking to 50 people. Until you really live through it, you don't really know what it is.
Maybe I can complement, because if you try to look for a company which you believe in their purpose, what their purpose, and believe in it, your life will be much easier. Through your careers, you will go through time where you will not agree with all the decision, you will be tired, you will, some of you very likely will have some burnout. But if you do believe on the purpose of the company, if you choose to be optimistic, it will help you to get through those tough moments when if you have a boss not as good as the previous one, if whatever challenges you face, if the purpose makes sense, you can fight through it. So at least for me, it's helping a lot.
That's great. And I like to add something. For me, it would be, don't be scared, try. It's okay to make mistakes. You don't know until you've tried. You don't know until you've lived through it. And if you don't like it, with the sense of having really, really tried for a while, then don't stick around. If it doesn't feel right, then move on. And the advice I would recommend to any one of you, the advice I would have liked to have last in my career is like, if you don't get promoted after 3 years for maximum internally, if you have not changed jobs role internally, you need to go somewhere else. Why? Because you reach normally your comfort zone. You're not learning anymore. And when you stop learning, you lose your edge. You need to keep learning all the time, because otherwise you'll get bored, you'll get messy, you won't do a good job anymore for you and for the company. So don't hesitate and try things.
Thank you, Mimi. One last piece of advice, Nicolas?
That on my course.
Yeah, that's one. So second one. No, I think follow your passion is very important, but also, and it goes together. Make sure try to manage to work with people you like working with, which has very much to do also with EQ. Because very often you see is that when people are not happy, it's much more like they are not happy. The job itself. When you work a lot, anything becomes interesting at some point. Your heart to it at some point, you know. It's true. Very often is the people relationship that can be. It's not always easy because you start with your own issue. Flattening up to the way people also. It's not only got some relationship issues, maybe also on your side. It's opening up and trying basically to solve the problems through EQ and through understanding, managing properly. It's really
Good. So I'm going to turn over to you, all of you, and invite you to ask questions. Raise your hand. Yes.
Thanks so much for the time for the presentation. Really enjoying it. My name is Mirel. I am studying SMIP and I am from Mexico, so not French.
that's okay.
So I have two questions, one in particular for Mimi and the second one for everyone who wants to take it. So you've been in both sides, right? And someone that comes into the country already been like a hiring manager, right? What are the differences that you're seeing in the market for newcomers, immigrants for finding roles? And the second, or whoever wants to take the question, is definitely there are challenges for us as newcomers, as immigrants, as Latins, and whatever. What are your specific maybe suggestions, if you have some, for overcoming these challenges, achieving a career here in maybe Singapore or APAC?
I think you should always hire people for their attitude rather than their skills. Your skills can be taught, they can be learned. Attitude is different. So when I've looked for a job, but also when I've hired, that was one of my criteria. As I look for a job, I always try to create a relationship. People buy from people hire people that they want to work with, they can see themselves. So my advice would be for you to create those relationships. The market right now in tech specifically in Singapore is complicated. When you're not a PR, you're a foreigner, it's difficult. So the more experience you can get through internship, the more relationships you can create through talking to a lot of senior people, but also peers, is gonna be key on success. Joining also as a woman, a number of network women in business is gonna be helpful. Finding not just a mentor, but a sponsor, somebody who's gonna help open the doors for you is gonna be key. Not just now, but all through your career. And people are not gonna open these doors or spend time mentoring you. Don't give them something. We do it, of course, because we want to give back. But I would always suggest that you propose some reverse mentoring. We're older, we're still learning, and we get a lot of inputs from the younger generation. And we get it back. As leaders, it's always great to hear how we're doing. Suggest it. When you find these people that you want them to be your mentors or your sponsors, suggest to give them something back. Your feedback is important too.
I completely agree with everything you said. The network and joining associations has been for me. Second question. Who's that? And we have another question. Yeah. And then we'll take the question.
The reality is that you all have studies, right? All have grades, all have diploma. So typically it's not what's going to make the difference. So you need to be clear on first, what do you want to do, right? Getting back to the point that we're on patient. And then you need to build your story. What is the story? What is your story? What do you stand for? Why is it should take you and not somebody else, right? So if you want to work in the luxury industry, for example, right? And if you want a job at, let's say, LVMH, which is the French company in that space. If you decide overnight that you want to work at the LVMH, right? And for all your internships, for example, you've done it in industry also, in industry that have nothing to do with this. Then you automatically are, slightly, you're not, it's going to be very tough for you compared to somebody that for the past 5 years knew that she or he wanted to work at the LVMH and therefore has done an internship maybe at LVMH in the past, in other, luxury industry or related industry, and say, depending on the function that you want to work in, some function related. So I think what's very important is be clear where you want to go, and then just build your experience, your expertise, your network, right, along those that.
We have one question here, and I'll come to you afterwards. Thank you so much. Yes.
Hello, my name is Hui Yue. I've been living in France for 10 years, and I've been working in Paris for 6 years. And then I just moved to Singapore to start my career in a totally different industry. It's commodity trading. Same industry, this Nicola. And before I was working actually in FX and technology software, financial software. So this change actually is quite a change in terms of if and my career. So I would like to get some advice maybe from Nicola. If you have some advice to start the career of trading, what would be your advice?
That's very specific. Yeah.
It's not easy. I think what you first want to assess to understand is the value you can bring the organization over. So it all depends also on what you do. Commodities trading, you can have a lot of various functions. It can be logistics, it can be financing, it can be trading. The various functions, which are discussed today, but to really try to understand actual value add within with your function. And from there to really try to understand deeply the subject matter. So I'm not, I'll discuss here the own quality, the EQ, what we said, which is extremely important. actually this specific technical, issue of changing job, it is really important is to understand the heart of the matter, not the methodology, how to think, why you do that. And that goes also very much by not always easy, right? The faster you do it, the more you actually understand what you do. You have the intelligence of what you do. Key really goes by kind of certain old experience from others.
Thank you. But I would reinforce the importance of curiosity in anything we do. Keeping curious, asking questions is critical, especially if you as you evolve, as you grow, if you want to innovate, that's really essential. I'll come to you in a minute. Avantika, do we have questions from our audience online?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. Can I go for it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. One of the questions is, which country in Asia do you think is the next big business move? What is the next trend in Asia? As Singapore and Hong Kong are typically the popular choices, what do you see as the next possible option?
Very great question, and I'm sure all of our panelists could answer that because they've been briefed and briefed.
It depends also on the industries.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
so, right now, if we talk about data centers, you have a lot of build happening in the neighboring countries, so in Malaysia, in Thailand, in Indonesia. So you have a lot of opportunities in energy management and data center. If you look at IT consulting, professional services, coding, and so on, you have a big growth in Vietnam right now. A lot of offshoring are happening in India, but also Vietnam. So I would say it really depends on the industry. I'm not going to talk about tech at this stage, but I can see also a lot of people moving to Thailand, big to Bangkok because it's cheaper. Living cheaper, the cost also of employment is a bit cheaper. And we actually have more French people, by the way, in Bangkok now than in Singapore. And a lot of also headquarters are moving there too.
Anybody else wants to follow up?
Just what I think, obviously, so India is not in my zone, so it's a bit difficult for me. Clearly, that's the enormous giant waking up, by far bigger than any other country in East Asia in terms of potential in the short term. I would put Indonesia. Obviously, just looking at the population, the GDP habitant, but it's more of a 15 years journey. So there is already opportunity short term. You mentioned data center, that's probably. Yeah. And the last one will be Vietnam. So Vietnam, very short term, very hard now with the different crises they are facing, but with China +1 chain, a lot of opportunity in the industry.
And that's why when you consider your question about some difficulties that young professionals might experience getting started in Singapore, there's so many other ways in the region. And that's where looking and exploring and looking for the next big opportunities, the next El Dorado maybe, could be interesting. I'll come back to you, Avantika. One question I think you wanted to ask a question.
Yes, hello, my name is Edmaline, and my question is gonna echo what you were saying, Olivier. Once you've started your career let's say that you want to, make your career take a new directions, maybe change your industry or slightly change the domain where you work. Like considering yourself in France, it may seem a bit easier because it's higher if you this way. But being in Singapore or anywhere else in Asia, being a foreigner, you have to prove that your skills match the job position. Otherwise, it's really hard to get your resume through the hiring process. And so I was wondering, because we were talking about this career path, what is your opinion and what would be your advice for kind of making your career take new directions, keeping learning, keeping reinventing your career when you are facing these challenges as a foreigner?
Very good question. I think so first, when you try to repurpose your career, you made a very good point, which is frankly, typically people would hire based on your experience and expertise. So I take my example. I was in the industry in the consumer space, right? And I wanted to move to consulting for various reasons, the scope of the job. And the only way I could manage to find out was, okay, what can I bring with my experience to the consulting world? I know that I'm going to learn a lot, I'm not a consultant, but and the fact is that I moved basically, yes, in consulting, but still within the same team. So the type of job has totally changed. The type of I would say thematics have really changed, but at least I had the sector as kind of an anchor. And I think as you look at to repurpose yourself or change direction, and I don't think it's more difficult abroad than in France. I think France, you probably will have similar challenges. It's all about, put yourself in the shoes of where you want in the hiring person, and try to showcase what you can bring to the party. And the more the closer it is from what you do, it's justified. But I think you can be creative in the way you position yourself, and also you can do. I mean, for me, between moving industry to kind of consulting, I've done an MBA. MBA gives you credentials or the right to kind of succeed, right? MBA or other, So I think try to find something that helps you. Again, this is aligned to what I was saying earlier, which is where do you want to go? Where are you today? And what is the story that you want to?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Avantika, one last question from online.
Yep, I have one more. What is one of the aspects that you enjoyed the most while working in the region through your experiences?
What did you enjoy the most, huh?
Yeah.
What did you enjoy the most?
For me, the speed.
The speed.
The speed and the diversity of the challenges we are facing. I think one of you mentioned is not really here is not really a region, is a string of pearls, meaning every country is so different and so unique that means having a regional role are faced with a lot of different challenges, context, and that's really interesting, and you learn a lot.
It's here. Two other trade advisors are nodding as well. Absolutely.
I would concur. And in a region which is big, but if you take only Southeast Asia, about 2 hours or 3 hours flight from everywhere. So in very different places, very fast. You get to travel in the region. It's just.
Can I go back to your question? Because I think we've not addressed one point. So I wanted to share 2 examples I've been. So I worked 18 years in telcos, and moving to energy management was not a given. It was an opportunity. Because the customer I was going to take care of, remember, I'm not a mechanical engineer or engineer, but the customer I was going to take care of were telcos and by extension, the hyperscaler and those. So there was a link. That's the first example. So if you can find the link and you position it, it works. The other example I want to give is when I create my startup in the wine business. I've never been in the wine business. My parents were not winemakers. I've always drunk wine and love wine tasting. So that's it. That's it. No, but to build up credentials, and I did that little company after my MBA because it gave me the sense that I could do anything, right? But it took me a while, and there was a lot of on, but I tested my idea. I had an idea. I tested it. I built Wine Club. I built the network of the woman professional. I went through certification. I prepared. And nowadays, even though I've never worked in the wine industry before, I believe I'm legit. But I built it up. So you can do a big stretch, but you need to consciously, as you said it, it's a passion, you build on it. And then you become ready.
Requires also a bit of patience. And perseverance. Good, thank you so much. And that's a wine tasting, which is always nice. All right, thank you so much to all of you for being here tonight and for sharing your stories with our audience here on campus and online. So we can maybe give a big round of applause. Please also helped organize these people. Organizing the event is lots of work in the background. So Yvonne, thank you so much, Yvonne. Yvonne is Robin.
Yes.
We're just outside waiting. And Cheryl, Mark, online we have Avantika. Thank you so much. Questions? And we invite you to stay in touch and attend the course if you want. Always good. Or with Nina, I might see some of you very soon again. Online, it was a pleasure to welcome you from afar. And if you have any other questions, Yvonne and her team will also be very happy to answer them. And we'll see you maybe some other time. Thank you so much and have a great evening.